Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight, we're rowing back to the Viking Age, a time of long ships, mead-soaked warlords, and personal hygiene so optional it barely made the guest list. This is the story of Viking slavery, the not-so-glorious reality behind all those horn-helmeted myths. You won't be raiding, pillaging, or howling like a berserker. No, you'll be scrubbing his boots. You'll be the nameless figure, shivering in the mud, chained to a post, quietly hoping your master forgets you exist, because when he remembers, it's never good. Before you start Googling how to pronounce thrall, or wondering whether it's better to be worked to death, or just sold again, take a second to like the video and subscribe, especially if your idea of a soothing bedtime story involves forced labour, ritual humiliation, and historically accurate despair. Leave a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Then close your eyes, take a deep breath, and prepare to live, suffer, and eventually rot as property. You wake to the sound of a boot hitting your ribs. Not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to remind you what you are. Property. A thing. A piece of meat with some light chores attached. You roll over, onto frozen dirt, trying not to groan, because groaning invites attention, and attention invites pain. The man standing over you doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The kick was the message. Get up. Start existing for someone else's convenience. There's no grand origin story here. You weren't a warrior taken in battle, clutching a sword with honour in your eyes. You weren't the last survivor of a noble house, sold off in a tragic betrayal. You were a person in the wrong place at the wrong time, and now you're not a person at all. You're a thrall, a Viking slave. You eat what you're given, sleep where you're allowed, and speak only when spoken to, preferably in a tone that doesn't irritate anyone important. The term thrall sounds dramatic, almost romantic in an Old Norse way, but that's just branding. In practice, it means you have no rights, no choices, and no future. You do what you're told, or you suffer. Sometimes you do what you're told and suffer anyway. It depends on the weather, or your master's mood, or whether the goats escaped again, and someone needs to blame something with legs, and no legal standing. You're not alone, of course. There are others like you. Viking society loves its hierarchies, and the bottom of the pile is quite crowded. You're the base layer of their social pyramid, supporting the farmers, traders, warriors, and the occasional berserker who smells like fermented onions and violence. Your presence helps keep the others civilized. Nothing makes a free man feel freer than watching someone else get whipped for forgetting to stir the porridge. Your day starts before sunrise and ends after sunset, assuming the sun bothers showing up at all. It's winter, which means darkness, snow, and a general atmosphere of damp misery. You wear what's left of what you were captured in, possibly supplemented by a sack with holes cut out for your limbs, if your owner is feeling generous or doesn't want to look at your frostbitten shins. Clothes are not a priority. Warmth is for people whose names are remembered. Your bed is straw, mouldy, itchy, and shared with lice who have better job security than you do. You curl around yourself at night, trying to preserve what little body heat you generate. And sometimes you wonder if you're dead already. But then your joints ache, your stomach growls, and someone throws a bucket of wastewater too close to where you're lying. Ah, yes, still alive, unhelpfully so. You don't get paid, obviously, but you might be rewarded with extra scraps or not getting beaten for a day. It's all very motivational. You learn to measure success in small things, not being called a dog today, getting to eat something with texture, not being accused of cursing the goats just because you looked at them wrong. That last one really stuck with you. The language barrier is also fun. You don't speak Old Norse, or if you do, it's a butchered version you've picked up from curses, insults, and shouted orders. No one's teaching you grammar. They want you obedient, not eloquent. You respond to gestures, tone of voice, and the looming presence of a club. Communication, in this setting, is mostly about avoiding pain. You have a name probably, but no one uses it. Your master calls you boy, girl, or sometimes just snaps his fingers. If you're lucky, he gives you a nickname based on whatever task you perform most often. Bucket, rags, muck. It's a kind of poetry. You used to flinch when you heard your real name in your dreams. Now you barely remember it. That was someone else, someone with dreams and family and hope. You've since upgraded to a life of strategically lowered expectations. You try not to make eye contact with the freeborn unless they want something. Being noticed is rarely good. Sometimes they like to remind you what you are, shove you, insult you, use you as a demonstration. It's not personal. They treat livestock the same way, but unlike the cow, you can understand what they're saying, and you know when to flinch. The cow has a simpler life, really. Every now and then, you think about escape, but you don't know where you are. You don't know who to trust, and your chances of surviving alone in the freezing wilderness are slightly lower than your chances of being adopted by Odin and elevated to godhood. Besides, you wouldn't get far with frostbitten feet, no supplies, and a face everyone in the village associates with "don't let that one leave." So you don't run, you endure. Because that's what thralls do. You swallow your pride, your pain, and your identity. You work until your hands bleed, then you work some more. You sleep when you can, eat what you're given, and try not to die in a way that inconveniences anyone. That would be rude, and somewhere deep in your skull a tiny, useless part of you still hopes. Not for freedom. You're not that delusional. But maybe for a day without kicks, a day when no one remembers you exist, a quiet, forgettable day, the best kind. Your arrival wasn't dramatic. There was no fanfare, no shouting of prices, no auctioneer banging a gavel. That's too organised, too theatrical. You arrived like livestock, shoved off a ship, dragged through a muddy port, and delivered like a sack of turnips that unfortunately breathes. If you stumbled, you were prodded forward. If you fell, someone kicked you until you got up again. No one explained anything. They didn't need to. Everything you needed to know was written on the faces around you. You're not a person anymore. The journey here was its own kind of horror, of course, packed into the belly of a ship that stank of sweat, salt, and someone's last meal making a reappearance. You were chained next to strangers, other captives, criminals, or simply unlucky people from unlucky villages. Food came irregularly, water even less so, and sleep was the thing you did when you passed out from exhaustion. You don't remember how many days it lasted. Time blurred into a continuous loop of hunger, cold and silence, broken only by coughing or whimpering. But now you're here, somewhere in Scandinavia probably. You haven't seen a map, and no one's exactly handing out welcome brochures. What you do know is that the people around you are taller, louder, and more comfortable with violence than anyone you've known before. They walk with confidence, speak in clipped commands, and look at you the way a butcher eyes a pig that's a bit too skinny. Slightly annoyed, but still willing to work with it. The first thing they do is sort you, not by name or age or skill, just by usefulness. Strong ones go one way, pretty ones go another. Old or injured, straight to the back, if not to the ditch. You try not to stand out. Looking too healthy makes you more valuable, and that's not always a good thing. Valuable means watched, used, broken in more specific ways. Then comes the branding. They don't explain why, they don't need to. It's not for you, it's for everyone else. A signal, a warning, a label burned directly into your flesh. Ownership made visible. You are property now, and property needs a mark, something permanent, something painful. They don't ask where you want it. They don't even ask if you're ready. 2 men hold you down, one at the shoulders, one at the legs. A third heats the iron until it glows the colour of angry gods. You try not to scream because screaming makes you look weak, but it also makes you human, and that's not allowed anymore. The iron touches your skin, and for a second, your world becomes nothing but white-hot agony and the smell of your own burning flesh. That smell stays with you longer than the pain. When they let go, your limbs are numb. You want to run, but your legs won't obey. You want to cry, but your eyes are too dry. What you do instead is collapse into the dirt and stare at nothing. Around you, others get the same treatment. Some sob. Some pass out. One girl vomits and gets slapped for it. The man with the iron doesn't flinch. He's done this before. He'll do it again. Later, they'll tell you, if anyone bothers to talk to you at all, that your new brand means something. A symbol of the household that owns you. A sign of who you belong to. Like a cattle mark, but more poetic. You don't ask what the mark looks like. It doesn't matter. You'll never see it. It's behind your shoulder, or on your upper arm, or maybe your chest if someone was feeling especially cruel that day. All you know is that it hurts when you sleep on it, and people look at it before they look at your face. You might get a collar too, not always. Depends on the owner. Some prefer subtlety, a whispered command, a quiet threat. Others like their dominance loud and visible. A leather strap around your neck does the trick. It chafes, of course, especially in the rain. But complaining is out of the question. The collar isn't for your comfort, it's for theirs. Once branded, you're no longer a stranger. You're a fixture. You belong here, in the worst possible way. The freeborn children will point at you. The neighbours will nod politely to your owner and avoid looking at you directly. The other slaves will glance at your mark, judge your pain tolerance, and silently welcome you to the invisible community no one talks about. At night, when you lie awake trying not to shift against your raw skin, you wonder if the worst is over. It's a nice thought. Comforting, naive. You don't realise yet that the branding was just the introduction, a ceremonial unpersoning to make what comes next easier for everyone. Now they don't have to remind themselves you're lesser. They've literally carved it into you. Tomorrow you'll start your duties. You'll be beaten if you do them wrong, and possibly beaten if you do them right. Your body will adapt. Your mind will bend. You'll become what they need you to be. Silent, obedient, unremarkable. That's survival now. Not living, surviving, like a branded goat with just enough sense to keep out of the way. The brand itches as it heals. You try not to scratch. Infection would be seen as laziness, and laziness is seen as defiance. And defiance gets punished. You'll learn, quickly, or not at all. Your role is assigned with all the warmth and ceremony of sorting firewood, a quick once-over by someone who doesn't care if you have a name, a soul, or any prior experience, followed by a vague gesture and a barked order. That's it. Congratulations. You now have a purpose, or rather, your body does. You're either going to spend your days indoors, enduring the whimsy of your master's family, or outside, locked in a losing battle with the elements, livestock, and a hoe that was last sharpened in the time of Odin. If you're sent into the house, don't get excited. House slave doesn't mean pampered. It just means that instead of frostbite and cow dung, you get smoke inhalation and daily humiliation. You'll spend your hours stoking fires, hauling water, grinding grain, and being close enough to your owners that they can hit you without walking too far. You're expected to be invisible until needed and perfectly attentive at all times, like furniture, but with more potential for mistakes. There are perks to being inside, sure. You're less likely to freeze to death, for one, and occasionally you get scraps from the table, which is thrilling when you compare it to the boiled roots and thin porridge served outside. But the trade-off is visibility. House slaves are under constant watch. Every move, every sound, every sigh is a potential offence. You'll be expected to anticipate needs you weren't told about and blamed for problems you didn't cause. Forget to refill the firewood? That's a beating. Spill a drop while serving ale? Another beating. Breathe too loudly near the Lord's daughter? Well, that one depends on the daughter. but it usually ends badly for you. Then there's the smiling. You'll be expected to smile, or at least not look too miserable. Misery, after all, is contagious, and no one wants to catch it during dinner. You'll be the background noise of comfort, the warm hands, the quiet footsteps, the obedient presence that makes the family feel superior without having to think about it. And should you make the mistake of being too good at your job, of seeming too clever or too aware, they'll remind you quickly and painfully that cleverness isn't your role. Your role is to serve, not to think. Leave the thinking to the people who own things. If you're assigned to the fields, the expectations are a bit clearer. Don't die, and keep the crops from doing the same. You rise with the sun, or before it, and you work until your back is a tapestry of dull aches and muscle spasms. You till, plant, weed, harvest, carry, drag, and sweat. Lots of sweat. Even in the cold, it finds a way. And if you're lucky enough to be working with animals, you also get the added joy of dodging hooves and shoveling manure. No one monitors your facial expressions out here. That's a bonus. You can scowl all you like, so long as your hands don't stop moving. You're not required to speak unless spoken to, and even then, grunts are perfectly acceptable. There's a sort of freedom in the field, a grim, exhausting kind of freedom where you can hate everything out loud, as long as you do it while lifting something heavy. The food situation is worse, of course. You're lower on the totem pole out here, and your meals reflect that. A cold bowl of barley mush, maybe with a hint of onion, if someone was feeling festive. But at least you're not serving that food to someone who will criticise how you stand while holding the tray, and you're far less likely to be summoned for special duties, which is the polite way of saying being abused in more personal ways by someone who thinks your silence is part of the furniture. Of course, the two roles sometimes overlap. You might be a house slave who gets sent to the fields as punishment, or a field slave brought inside when someone dies, or runs away, or is deemed too hideous for indoor duties. You don't get to choose. Assignments change based on the moods of your superiors, the harvest schedule, or whether the dog looks hungry and someone decides it's your fault. And in both roles, you're reminded constantly that you're replaceable. There's always another captive, another peasant's child, another debt-born soul who can take your place. The only thing keeping you alive is your ability to be slightly more useful than inconvenient. You learn quickly what tasks buy you silence, which chores keep you ignored, and being ignored is a luxury in your world. Eventually, your body starts to adapt. You build calluses. Your knees stop aching mostly. Your hands bleed less when they split. Your back only screams in the morning now. You move through your duties with mechanical efficiency, never too fast, never too slow, just enough to not be noticed, the sweet spot of survival. You don't daydream anymore. You don't flinch when they shout. That part of you, the flinching part, got branded out weeks ago. And if you're ever foolish enough to envy the other type of slave, to think the grass might be slightly less blood-stained on the other side, just remember, the house slaves are suffocating under eyes and expectations, and the field slaves are slowly dissolving into the land they tend. You are not one or the other. You are whatever they need whenever they need it. A shifting tool, a human placeholder, a warm, exhausted shadow dragging itself through another day. And no matter where they put you, inside, outside, in the stable, by the fire, you are always serving someone else's comfort. That is your role. Winter doesn't arrive in the Viking world so much as it ambushes you. One day, the air just feels damp and irritating, and the next, it's biting through your clothes like a pack of wolves. You never actually see the seasons change, but you just wake up and your fingers don't work anymore. Then your toes, then, eventually, your entire body starts negotiating with you. Do you really need to feel your limbs? Are ears a priority? What about your nose? Maybe that can go. As a thrall, you don't get winter gear. That would imply someone cared whether you survived. The freeborn have furs, cloaks, wool layers, and boots that aren't made of thin regrets and worn-out hope. You have whatever you were wearing in autumn, now stiff with frozen sweat, patched with whatever scraps you can find, and layered with a fine coating of smoke, ash and desperation. Your blanket is a thin sack that smells like mould and dogs, and your bed has transitioned from uncomfortable to mildly lethal. The wind is its own character in this season, not just cold, but spiteful. It snakes through the cracks in your shelter and slaps you awake at night, as if offended that you tried to rest. Indoors or outdoors, it finds you. There's no such thing as being out of the wind when you're a slave. The best you can hope for is being out of the wind enough that you don't lose a toe this week. Your hands are the first to go. The skin cracks, then bleeds, then scabs, then reopens. You try to wrap them in cloth, but the cloth gets wet and freezes to your skin. You'd complain, but your voice would just freeze halfway out of your throat and drop to the ground like a broken icicle. Besides, no one's listening. Everyone's cold. It's just that you're colder. Fieldwork doesn't stop in winter. It just gets crueler. You haul firewood, break ice to get at frozen water, tend to livestock that are somehow warmer than you despite being covered in filth. You trudge through snowdrifts that come up to your thighs, dragging carts, tools, or your own exhausted carcass, whichever is heavier that day. Every chore takes twice as long and costs you 10 times the energy, but your overseer's patience doesn't stretch with the daylight. He still expects the same pace, or faster. After all, you'll warm up if you move faster. House slaves don't fare much better. Inside the longhouse, the fire helps, sure, but it also creates a lovely indoor fog of smoke, soot, and barely breathable air. Your lungs burn as you hunch by the hearth. Not for comfort, but because you're turning the spit or feeding logs into the flames, while everyone else enjoys the warmth with their backs. You get the side that's good for slow cooking and eye irritation. And even if you catch a moment by the fire, don't linger. Get caught warming yourself too long, and you'll be accused of slacking, of stealing heat, of pretending to be human. A quick cuff to the back of the head usually resets your priorities. Heat is for the freeborn. You're here to manage it, not enjoy it. Then there's the illness. Colds, fevers, infected wounds. Winter is generous like that. Once the snow falls, so do the weak. And you do your best not to be one of them. Because if you get sick, you don't get soup and rest. You get kicked out into the snow and told to get over it. If you're lucky, someone throws you a rag to cough into. If you're not, they just replace you. There's always another thrall somewhere, one with slightly better lungs and slightly less frostbite. Nighttime is the worst. The cold settles in your bones and refuses to leave. You curl into a fetal position, trying to preserve warmth like it's the last coal in a dying hearth. Your breath comes out in little clouds and you learn to count them just to pass the time. 1 cloud for each second you haven't frozen to death yet. Sometimes the silence is broken by someone crying. Sometimes someone doesn't wake up. You don't ask questions. You just shift to the warmer spot. Sleep is a gamble. If you sleep too deep, you might not wake up. If you don't sleep enough, you'll collapse tomorrow. Either way, you lose. You learn to drift in and out. Half conscious, half frozen, wrapped in shivering like a second skin. You dream of fire, not cozy fire, just anything that burns. A burning building sounds like a vacation at this point. The funny thing is your body starts to adjust. Not in a healthy way. Just, it stops bothering to protest. You're always cold, so cold becomes your new baseline. Shivering becomes muscle memory. You forget what it's like to have sensation in your fingers. When someone mentions spring, it sounds like a myth, a cruel story told to trick the weak into hope. Eventually, the sun stays up a little longer. The snow softens, the mud returns, and with it, a new set of miseries. But winter leaves its mark. Your joints ache in ways that won't heal. Your skin is a patchwork of calluses, cracks, and scars. And your spirit, well, it's buried under layers of frost. You kept it alive, barely, like an ember under ash. But you made it. You survived another winter. That's what they'll say anyway. Survived. As if survival was a prize and not just a consolation for everything you lost along the way. There is no formal handbook for Viking slave discipline. No list of rights or warnings posted on the wall. Just a set of unspoken rules enforced through bruises, scars, and a deeply personal relationship with humiliation. You learn the system not through explanation, but through repetition, cause and effect. Step out of line, feel pain. Say the wrong thing, lose blood. Forget your place, and they'll remind you with whatever object is closest to hand. And if no object is close enough, a fist works just fine. Punishments aren't rare, they're daily maintenance, like feeding the animals or cleaning out the hearth. Necessary, routine, and designed to keep the household in order, or at least keep the freeborn from getting annoyed. You'll hear the word discipline tossed around a lot, as if it's about order or morality. It's not. It's about control. Raw, simple, and one-directional. You misstep, they assert dominance. You fall silent, they feel powerful. It's less about justice and more about establishing a rhythm, one where your suffering is the beat that keeps the song of obedience playing. The tools vary: a switch from the woodshed, a belt, a stick, a boot, a shovel if someone's feeling especially theatrical. Occasionally, it's bare hands, not out of mercy, but because it sends a clearer message. No buffer, just skin on skin. You'll come to know the preferences of each household member. Some like to shout before they hit, others do it quietly, with a grim efficiency that somehow feels worse. A few enjoy the spectacle. They make you kneel first or apologise or cry. It's not about correction, it's about performance. There's a particular kind of silence that falls just before punishment. You'll learn to recognise it, a shift in posture, a tightening of the jaw, that awful pause when someone decides whether your mistake is worth making an example of. If you're lucky, they walk away. If not, you brace for the worst. And it always comes. Most punishments aren't for disobedience, they're for inconvenience. You moved too slowly, you spilled something, you looked wrong, someone else made a mistake and you were standing nearby. Or someone had a bad day and you were the nearest breathing object. In those moments, you're less a person than a pressure valve. Your pain is how they let off steam. Public punishment is especially popular. It reinforces the hierarchy, keeps the others in line. A beating in front of the other thralls reminds everyone where they stand, or kneel. Sometimes you're paraded around with a mark of shame. A shaved head, a collar tightened to choking, a tunic stained with something foul and sticky that you're forbidden to wash. Nothing kills pride like becoming the day's entertainment. And if the master really wants to make a point, they'll tie you up and leave you on display. Not for hours, for days. Rain, snow, sunburn, insect bites. These are part of the sentence. They call it pillaring, though it rarely involves an actual pillar. More often it's a post in the yard or a tree in the pasture, where the crows can watch you suffer. You'd think disobedience would be met with harsher punishment than incompetence, but it's the reverse. Disobedience implies intent, and intent requires thought, which is dangerous. So they don't punish you more for defiance, they extinguish you. Runaway slaves get no second chances. If caught, they're crippled, hamstrung sometimes, literally, or marked with a hot iron across the face. Not just branded this time, mutilated, permanently. It sends a message to everyone else. This is what hope costs. Women, of course, get an entirely separate set of torments. If a female thrall disobeys, the punishment often comes in the form of assault dressed up as discipline. It's about ownership, not justice. About reducing you further, reminding you that your body is not yours, not for warmth, not for comfort, and certainly not for safety. Some punishments are purely psychological. Your food is taken away for a day, or a week. You're made to sleep outside while others are indoors. You're isolated, ignored, treated like a ghost that still has chores. They don't have to hurt you physically every time. They just have to make you afraid. Afraid to speak, to rest, to make eye contact. Fear is its own leash, and you wear it well. But the worst punishments aren't violent. They're strategic. You're offered kindness, then it's ripped away. A warm piece of bread, then a slap. A compliment, then silence. They train you with inconsistency, like a dog, keep you off balance so you never know what's coming. Praise starts to feel like a threat. Smiles make you flinch. That's how they keep you in line. Not with constant pain, but with unpredictability. It's more effective. It breaks you slower. Eventually you internalize it. You flinch before the blow lands. Apologize before you know what you did. You anticipate punishment like weather. Unpleasant, inevitable, and completely outside your control. It becomes part of your routine. Wake, work, wince. You survive by learning the rules, or more accurately, by learning that there are no rules. Just whims, moods, and the occasional illusion of order. The only real law is this: they can hurt you, and you can't stop them. And so you become small, quiet, predictable. You fold into yourself like parchment in the rain, because control isn't just something they take, it's something they make you give up, willingly, bit by bit, until there's nothing left to punish, only a shadow that does what it's told. The gods are everywhere here. Odin, Thor, Freya, and all the rest, carved into wood, painted onto shields, and muttered in curses whenever someone stubs a toe or drops a bucket. There's a story for everything. Lightning? That's Thor showing off. A good harvest, Freya smiled on the land. A slave dropping dead in the snow? Clearly, the Norns wove a weak thread. Everything has a divine explanation, except your existence, which is conveniently left unaddressed. You are not included in their pantheon. You're not even included in their religion. The Norse gods are very interested in warriors, nobles, and the occasional goat, but not in you. You're not a chosen one. You're not a blessed one. You're not anything, really. Just background noise. The gods here reward strength, bravery, cunning, traits you're not allowed to show. You live in fear, not faith. And your prayers? If you still bother with them, don't make it past the smoke hole in the roof. If you came from a Christian village, which many thralls did, this entire spiritual arrangement is especially awkward. You might have grown up hearing about mercy, salvation, and a God who loves all his children. That story doesn't travel well. Here, mercy is a sign of weakness. Salvation is just dying faster. And love, well, let's not get carried away. The Viking gods don't love you. They barely tolerate their own followers. You're beneath their notice. You might as well pray to a broom. You might try to keep your old religion in secret, whispering a quiet Our Father before bed, crossing yourself when no one's watching. But be careful. Foreign faiths are viewed with suspicion, especially ones that preach meekness and humility, qualities these people associate with sheep, or worse, monks. You've seen what they do to monks. Spoiler: it doesn't end in a friendly theological debate. If you're caught practicing your faith, you won't be burned at the stake. That's too dramatic and expensive. But you'll be reminded physically that your God doesn't rule here. They might mock your rituals, tear your cross from your neck, or force you to take part in their festivals, just to watch the discomfort on your face. It's entertainment, really. A reminder that belief, like everything else, has a hierarchy. Religious festivals in this land are less like sacred gatherings and more like controlled chaos. Blood, feasting, shouting, and the occasional animal sacrifice. You don't get to join in, of course. You get to clean up afterward. If they're feeling generous, you might be allowed to watch from the edges. Not as a guest, but as a cautionary tale. See that one? Doesn't even believe in the gods properly? That's why his life looks like that. Sometimes they'll drag you into the ritual anyway. Not because they care about converting you, but because bodies are useful. Someone needs to carry the offerings, sweep the bones, scrub the altar. And if you flinch when they slit the throat of a goat or smear blood on their own faces, that's just proof you're still clinging to your soft, foreign ideas. You'll be scolded for disrespecting their gods, the same gods who sanctioned your enslavement. If you try to understand their myths, it doesn't help. They're proud of them. Tales of gods who lie, cheat, shapeshift, and occasionally seduce horses. You're supposed to find this inspiring. You don't, but you nod along anyway, pretending you see the wisdom in Odin gouging out his own eye for knowledge, while your own master can't be bothered to wash his feet. Even the concept of the afterlife offers no comfort. Valhalla is not for you. That's for warriors who die with a sword in hand, roaring defiance as they bleed into the mud. You, on the other hand, will die with a broom, a limp, and maybe a crust of bread still in your mouth. There is no glorious feast waiting for you, no Valkyries to scoop up your soul and carry it to eternal revelry. The best you can hope for is hell, the cold, unremarkable afterlife reserved for those who died pointlessly, which feels fitting. Eventually you stop thinking about religion, not because you've stopped believing, but because belief starts to feel like another chore. Another thing you have to manage, hide, protect. There's no spiritual reward for suffering, no divine rescue, just the same grinding misery, day after day, and the knowledge that no god, old or new, seems particularly interested in intervening. You stop asking why this is happening to you. You stop looking for signs. Your suffering is not a test. It's not redemptive. It's not meaningful. It's just efficient. That's what belief erodes into under this system. Something dry and brittle, a dull ache rather than a guiding light. Something you tuck away in your mind like a keepsake from a life that no longer exists. The freeborn sometimes talk about fate, about how the gods weave every soul's path before birth. If that's true, yours was woven by someone drunk, blindfolded, and possibly bored. But it doesn't matter. You still wake up. You still work. You still kneel. Faith, if you still have any, becomes a quiet thing. Not hope, not trust. Just a whisper into the dark. A habit. And like everything else in your life, even your religion isn't really yours anymore. It belongs to them. Or it's ignored by them. Or worse, it's used against you. Because in this world, belief is not sacred. It's just another collar. Your day begins before the sky bothers to light up. Not with a gentle nudge or a soft bell, but with the sound of someone shouting, stomping, or throwing something unpleasantly close to your head. You wake up stiff, cold, and sore in places you didn't even know could ache. Your joints creak like old wood, and your stomach has already started complaining. Not that it's going to be addressed anytime soon. You don't choose your chores. Chores choose you. Or, more accurately, whoever shouts first does. Some days you haul water from the well, heavy, sloshing buckets that bruise your thighs and freeze your fingers. Other days you muck out animal pens, scraping frozen manure into piles that will be used to fertilize crops you'll never be allowed to eat. You might be sent to the woods to collect firewood, a deceptively simple task that involves trudging through mud or snow, dodging low branches and trying not to die from exposure before you make it back. Inside the longhouse, the work is no kinder. You scrub pots with frost-stiffened hands, sweep soot across dirt floors that never really get clean, and grind grain using a hand mill designed to inflict permanent shoulder damage. If you're skilled or unlucky, you might be tasked with preparing food, which means standing near warmth but not enjoying any of it. You stir, chop, and taste nothing. You cook meals you won't eat for people who won't thank you. You're expected to anticipate needs, remember every command, and execute each task without delay or complaint. The workload shifts constantly, depending on the weather, the season, and whatever unreasonable standard your master has woken up with. One day you're patching a thatched roof in the rain, the next you're trying to teach a stubborn goat not to trample turnips. You never really finish anything, As soon as you complete one task, another is waiting, and another, and another. You rest only when your body fails you. There are no breaks, no hours, just daylight and duty, and then darkness and still more duty. If you pause too long or move too slowly, someone notices. If someone notices, someone reacts. You don't even sigh aloud anymore. That's a luxury. That's the kind of sound people make when they think they matter. As for meals, calling them that is generous. You eat when someone remembers you need food to keep functioning, and even then, it's rarely a priority. Breakfast, if it exists, is usually a ladle of thin porridge. No milk, no sweetness, no warmth, just something to put in your stomach so it doesn't collapse inward. By midday, you might get a crust of bread or some vegetable scraps, assuming the dogs didn't get them first. Dinner is the highlight, which says more about your day than the food. A bit of stew, mostly water, and maybe a hint of fish or root vegetable. If you're very lucky, you'll find a sliver of meat, possibly identifiable. Probably not. You don't eat with the freeborn. You eat away from them, behind the house or near the animals, crouched over your bowl, like a starving dog guarding its find. You eat fast, not out of hunger, though there's always that, but because meals are timed. Take too long, and you're accused of idling. Eat too slow, and someone else might decide they want your portion. Sometimes you don't eat at all. Maybe there wasn't enough. Maybe you displeased someone. Maybe they just forgot. Hunger becomes a background hum, a constant pressure in your ribs. It sharpens your senses at first, then dulls them. Eventually, it becomes part of you, like the cold, the ache, the dread. You dream about food more than anything else. Not feasts, not banquets, just enough. A full bowl, a warm loaf, even the things you used to hate. Turnips, gristle, onions, now appear in your dreams, like cherished friends. There's no conversation at meals either, not between thralls. You might whisper, trade bites, pass along gossip if you're bold, but mostly you eat in silence, because speaking risks attention, and attention risks punishment. The food doesn't taste like much, but you've learned not to care. At this point, nourishment is measured in spoonfuls, not satisfaction. When food runs low, and it always runs low, you eat less. That's just how it works. The freeborn don't. Their portions stay the same. Yours disappear like smoke. You're expected to function anyway. No one recalibrates your workload to match your starvation level. You still carry, scrub, chop, drag. The body just learns to do it, slower, shakier, with more internal negotiation. You know not to ask for more. That's not how this world operates. Need is not a reason. Hunger is not an excuse. You eat what you're given, and you're grateful for it. Not because you actually are, but because it's safer to pretend. Gratitude is another performance you learn, like obedience, like silence, like breathing without taking up space. By nightfall, your limbs are heavy, your stomach is mostly empty, and your brain is a fog of fatigue. You've completed dozens of tasks, none of which will be remembered. You've consumed just enough calories to do it all again tomorrow. There's no end to the chores. They don't get easier. They don't get lighter. You just get more efficient at them, or more numb. Eventually, the difference stops mattering. There are laws in this society, quite a lot of them in fact, meticulously crafted rules about land, inheritance, honour, and blood debts. Entire assemblies gather to discuss them, the thing they call it, where free men debate justice with great seriousness and slightly less soap. They recite codes, cite precedents, and settle disputes over cattle, insults, and boundaries. It's all very orderly, very civilized. Unless you're a thrall, in which case none of it applies to you. You're not a legal person, you're property, like a sheep, or a fence, or a particularly useful log. When the law looks at you, it doesn't see who you are, it sees who owns you. You have no right to speak at the thing, no right to make a case, file a grievance, or object to your treatment. If someone injures you, they haven't committed a crime. They've damaged someone's possession. If someone kills you, well, they might owe your master compensation. You, of course, get nothing. You're dead. This arrangement isn't accidental. It's by design. A tidy hierarchy reinforced by tradition, religion, and cold economic logic. The law exists to protect order, not individuals, and certainly not the kinds of individuals who sleep in barns and don't get last names. If anything, the law makes it easier to control you. It's a leash dressed up in parchment. A system of rules that excludes you while pretending to include everyone. Even crimes committed against you are filtered through your owner. If someone assaults you, it's only a problem if your master cares enough to press the matter. Most don't. Sometimes, they even blame you for getting in the way of someone's fists. If someone else's thrall injures you, your master might grumble about the loss of productivity, but don't expect restitution. At best, you'll be patched up with a rag and told to walk it off. At worst, you'll be punished for making a scene. And should you pass it in a moment of madness or desperation, try to use the law in your defense. It backfires spectacularly. Accuse a free person of wrongdoing, and they'll laugh. Accuse your master, and you'll be beaten for slander. The idea that a thrall could have a case is almost funny. Your suffering isn't injustice, it's routine. You've seen the law in action. You've watched your owner settle disputes with other men over things like stolen livestock or damaged fences. They speak with authority. They invoke witnesses. They leave with resolutions, sometimes enforced by fines, sometimes by swords. You envy the predictability of it, the illusion of fairness, but it's not for you. If you're involved in one of these legal discussions, it's because someone is deciding what to do with you, not for you. You might be bought or sold through legal contracts. You might be included in someone's inheritance, listed right between the family's oxen and the kitchen tools. The law tracks your ownership the way it tracks tools and land, through tallies, not testimony. If you're sold, your name might be mentioned, or it might not. It doesn't matter. They'll see the brand on your skin. That's your only legal ID. There are rules about punishment, supposedly. Some vague limits about how badly a master can beat a thrall without facing consequences. But those limits are porous, and the consequences laughable. The real rule is, don't do anything that causes a scandal. If you're beaten half to death in private, no one blinks. If your corpse ends up somewhere inconvenient, then maybe someone files a complaint, not because you deserved better, but because it was messy. There is one legal path out of this life. Technically, it's called manumission, the act of freeing a slave. A master can do it if they feel generous or guilty or bored. Some even write it into their wills, the same way they might release a dog into the wild with a pat on the head. But don't get your hopes up. Manumission is rare, and it's not always a reward. Sometimes it just means being cast out, freed from protection as well as ownership, left to starve without a roof or a purpose. Even if you are freed, you don't become an equal. You become a freedman, a legally distinct class of person who still carries the social stink of slavery. You'll be barred from owning certain property, excluded from most legal assemblies, and constantly reminded of where you came from. Freedom in this system is just a different kind of leash. Longer maybe, but still looped around your neck. In the meantime, your best bet is to stay invisible to the law. If no one talks about you, no one tries to legislate you. That's the safest option. You perform your duties, keep your head down, and pray that whatever legal dispute your master is involved in doesn't involve you as collateral. You've already learned that justice isn't blind. It just refuses to look down. So yes, there are laws. They gather, they discuss, they pretend to uphold order. And maybe they do, for the people who matter. But for you, the law is just another structure. You're crushed beneath. Another system you serve, but never benefit from. A distant hum of authority that you only feel when it lands on your back like a hammer. When people hear Viking raid, They picture longships slicing through cold waves, warriors leaping ashore with axes raised, villages burning, and treasure being hauled away in glorious muddy triumph. And yes, that happens. Sort of. But what they don't picture is you, the thrall, still on the shore, or worse, on the ship, hauling supplies, tending the animals, and praying you're not one of the prizes brought back in chains this time. Because Viking raids don't just create slaves, they use them too. You don't get a weapon. No one's handing you a sword and asking for your input on strategy. You're there to carry, row, cook, and obey. If you're on the ship, you row with the other expendables, bound in leather, blistered from salt and effort. Your muscles locking up as the sea slaps you in the face. The freeborns shout orders over the roar of the wind. And if you lag, the man next to you gets hit. If he lags, you get hit. The system is blunt but effective. Sometimes you're left behind, not out of kindness, but because they need someone to stay and tend the homestead while the raiders are off plundering. You feed the animals, guard the tools, and pretend the women and children left behind won't turn on you if things go bad. If they suspect you're even thinking about escape while the men are gone, they make sure you have fresh bruises to remind you how bad an idea that would be. Raids don't pause the discipline, they just rearrange it. If you do go along, you're part of the machine. You unload gear, you carry stolen goods back to the ships, you sort through the wreckage for anything the warriors might have missed. Coins, cloth, salt, even nails. You're not looting, you're cleaning, your baggage with hands. You see villages burning, people screaming, and you keep your eyes down and your mouth shut. Because you're not a liberator or a victim, you're just cargo that walks. Sometimes you help manage the new captives. That's the part they don't sing about in sagas. The fresh slaves, bound and crying, hauled onto the boats like sacks of grain. You don't envy them. You pity them, yes, you know what's coming, but you also know better than to speak to them. They still have questions, hope. They haven't been broken yet. You, on the other hand, are useful, trained, quiet. And in this world, that's as close to safe as it gets. Watching new slaves arrive is like seeing your own past in reverse. The panic, the pleading, the desperate promises. You see it all from the outside now, and it doesn't make you feel stronger, just hollow. You want to say something, that it won't get better, that the pain doesn't stop, that names disappear. But what's the point? You're not allowed to speak unless spoken to, and besides, they'll figure it out soon enough. The warriors joke and laugh as they load the spoils. Gold, livestock, people, all weighed the same in their eyes. They talk about glory, about how the gods favour them, about how their enemies are weak, and their sons will sing of this victory. You know better. Glory smells like blood and fire and waste. Glory is heavy, and you're the one carrying it. It slips from your shoulders in awkward bundles, bruises your collarbone, and doesn't come with praise. Sometimes the raids go badly. The villagers fight back, or the weather turns, or the gods decide someone's due for a reminder. When that happens, the casualties are not evenly distributed. If a warrior dies, he's mourned, burned, and given a feast in his honour. If you're injured, you're baggage that broke. If you die, your body is dumped without ceremony, if it's even moved at all. Maybe you'll be left where you fell, eyes open, rain soaking through your tunic, forgotten before the ship finishes casting off. If the ship is damaged, or the retreat is disorganised, you're the one pulling double. You row harder, carry more, run on less. No one thanks you. You're lucky if they don't blame you. Slaves are convenient scapegoats when things go wrong. And once you're back home, bruised and exhausted, there's no rest. The tasks resume as if nothing happened. No one debriefs the thralls. No one asks how the raid felt from your side. You'd think, witnessing so much violence, you might become numb to it. But numbness isn't guaranteed. Sometimes it seeps in slowly, a quiet fog that keeps you from retching at the sight of burned flesh or shaking at the sound of screaming. Other times, you feel everything. You dream of the faces, the ones that look like yours, the ones you loaded like cargo, watched vanish into lives you wouldn't wish on anyone. They haunt you, not because you hurt them, but because you couldn't help them, because you knew exactly what was waiting. Viking raids sound like grand adventures to the people who don't do the rowing or the cleaning or the dyeing. To you, they're just another form of labour. Just more proof that no matter where you go, the hierarchy follows. You are not a raider. You're not a victim. You're not a witness. You're a shadow stitched to the edge of war. Dragged along, shoved aside, and swept back under the rug once the blood dries. And the worst part, you start to get good at it. Carrying, loading, surviving. You learn when to look away. You start to measure raids, not by blood spilled, but by how badly your back hurts afterward. Not by who suffered, but by how much you managed to avoid. That's what it means to survive a raid. Not to fight, not to win. Just to come back with fewer injuries than last time. And to pray you're never mistaken for someone worth looting. Again. At some point, maybe during your first winter, maybe while branding wood with the same iron they once used on you, you start to wonder about freedom. Not in a dramatic, torch-waving kind of way, just quietly. The thought flickers in the back of your mind, persistent but cautious, like a rat that's learned not to trust scraps too easily. Maybe, you think someday, maybe, if you're useful enough, loyal enough, quiet enough, you'll earn your way out. And to be fair, that's not completely delusional. Manumission does happen, technically. There are laws for it, processes. Some masters free their slaves after years of faithful service. Some do it in old age out of guilt or convenience. Others include it in their wills, a final generous gesture before dying comfortably in a bed you probably built. But here's the thing. You don't control any of that. You can't petition. You can't save up. You can't work your way out. Freedom in this system is a gift, a whim, a rare lottery ticket, handed out by someone who might not even remember your name. There are stories, of course, whispers passed between thralls in the early hours, when the house is quiet and no one's watching. This man was freed and became a blacksmith. That woman married a farmer and had a good life. They speak of it like myth, with all the fuzzy edges and convenient omissions you'd expect. You want to believe it? You do. Because hope, even false hope, is warmer than the wind blowing through the hole in your roof. But the odds are not in your favour. Most thralls die as they live, nameless, sore, and unfree. And even if you do get freed, you don't become a real member of society. You become a freedman, a half step up the ladder. Not enslaved, but never equal. You might be allowed to own some property, maybe even marry, but the stain never leaves. People look at you and still see what you were. They don't trust you. You're not invited to the assemblies, not welcomed into the inner circles. You're tolerated, like a scar that's stopped bleeding. And even reaching that level requires luck. You have to outlive your usefulness without becoming a burden. You have to avoid offending anyone important. You have to maintain just the right level of invisibility, present enough to be helpful, but never threatening, never outspoken. You must be the perfect servant for years, and then cross your fingers that your master has a moment of generosity right before he dies or sells you. Some thralls try to earn favour, clinging to the idea that obedience might buy freedom. They bow deeper, work harder, smile through punishments, flatter when flattery feels like acid in the mouth. Sometimes it works, sometimes it just makes you more valuable, and thus less likely to be let go. After all, why would anyone free their best tool? Why throw away a perfectly good broom because it said, please? Others go the opposite way. They harden, abandon the idea of freedom entirely. They mutter that it's a lie, a trick used to keep people docile. They spit when they hear manumission mentioned. But even they glance up when a master dies or when a child inherits the household. Because deep down, everyone wants out, even if it's just to die under your own roof, on your own terms. there's always the temptation to run. It grows stronger on the worst days when the bruises are fresh and the food is scarce, and the wind sounds almost like a voice calling from the woods. You imagine slipping away at night, vanishing into the trees, finding a place where no one knows your brand. But the world is bigger than your dreams, and far crueler. Where would you go? You have no money, no map, no allies. You'd last a week, if that. And if they caught you here, and they usually do, the punishment would make branding feel like a handshake. So you stay, you work, you endure, and that tiny ember of hope, that flicker of maybe, it doesn't go out. But it does dim. You stop thinking of freedom as a real thing and start treating it like a story. You tell yourself to make the days feel shorter. Not because you believe it'll happen, but because imagining it hurts less than admitting it won't. Sometimes, though, it resurfaces unexpectedly. A glance from your master that doesn't contain disgust. A passing comment about loyalty. A change in the household. You allow yourself one breath of belief, and then you tuck it away again, carefully, before anyone notices. Because the truth is, you don't dream of being free, not anymore. You dream of being left alone, of eating without being watched, of sleeping through the night, without waking to commands. You dream of less, not more. That's what slavery does. It doesn't just take your body. It trains your mind to settle for survival, to call scraps a feast, to treat silence as peace. And if freedom ever does come, if, by some twist of fate, you're granted your release, it won't be a sunrise moment. It'll be awkward. Paperwork, a short muttered announcement, and then you'll step outside and realise you have no idea what to do. You've spent so long being owned, you don't know how to exist without permission. That's not freedom. That's just a new kind of prison, one with different bars, but maybe someday you'll learn, or maybe not. Either way, don't get too excited. When your master dies, the first thing you feel is confusion. Not grief, not joy, just a kind of stunned pause. You've spent so long living according to someone else's rhythms that their sudden absence leaves a silence you don't know how to fill. No barked orders, no footsteps signalling your next command. Just stillness and the sound of people who matter rushing to figure out what happens next. You don't cry, you don't celebrate, you don't do anything really, because none of it is about you. The master's death may have been dramatic, a fall, a fever, a drunken accident with an axe, or it may have been quiet and slow, wrapped in furs and herbs. Either way, he dies as a free man, surrounded by ceremony. His family gathers, his name is honoured, and his property is inventoried. You are part of that inventory. There's no will to read aloud for your benefit. If there is one, it's read behind closed doors. If you're mentioned at all, it's in the same breath as livestock, the black-haired one in the kitchen, or the older field hand. You are appraised, not mourned. The family speaks of you like a burden or a windfall, depending on your usefulness and how many mouths they already have to feed. If you belong to a particularly cruel master, some of the other slaves might allow themselves a moment of silent satisfaction, but only for a moment, because cruelty may have been painful, but it was familiar, predictable, and now everything is uncertain. You've seen what happens when power changes hands. Sometimes the new owner wants to prove a point, assert control. Sometimes they want to clean house, literally and metaphorically. And you're just standing there, holding a broom and wondering if you're next on the list of things to discard. There's a chance, however small, that your master's death leads to manumission. Maybe he promised it. Maybe he even wrote it down. But don't count on it. Promises made to slaves are easily forgotten, especially by grieving relatives eyeing the estate. Unless you have powerful allies, which you don't, or witnesses who are willing to speak up, which they won't, your freedom, if once offered, will be quietly erased. What usually happens is redistribution. You're reassigned like a pot or a rug. Maybe the eldest son inherits you, along with the house and the land. If he's young and arrogant, you'll be worked twice as hard to prove a point. If he's old and indifferent, you'll be neglected, which is its own kind of suffering. If the estate is divided, you might be sent away, sold off, traded or gifted to someone who once admired your work ethic from across the fire pit. You may be separated from other slaves you've known for years, the woman who shared your sleeping mat, the boy you watched grow from a crying bundle into something close to human again. You don't say goodbye. There's no time, no ceremony, just a new cart to load, a new master's name to learn, and a new household to survive. In rare cases, your master's widow takes over. Sometimes that's better. Sometimes it's worse. Widows have less public power but more private control. They rule the house while pretending not to, and their anger is often more subtle and more enduring. You might be seen as a reminder of her husband's infidelity or of her own aging. Either way, resentment is not good news for you. You'll be reminded daily that your place in the home is tolerated, not valued. If there are no heirs, things get more complicated. The estate might be seized by relatives or by local authorities or by the chieftain, who may see you as a convenient addition to his own property list. In the confusion, some slaves try to run. You think about it too. You look at the chaos, the mourning, the distracted guards, and you imagine slipping away into the woods. But you don't, because the roads are still dangerous, your feet are still bare, and someone will always notice you're missing. So you wait, you keep working, you respond to new names, new routines, new hands. You're moved like a chair, adjusted like a saddle, and told to smile through it all. The only thing that doesn't change is your status. Slave before, slave after. The faces shift, but the rules stay the same. And even when a death shakes the household, life moves on quickly. The fields still need tending. The animals still need feeding. You still have to wake before dawn and pretend that none of this has affected you. If anything, you're expected to work harder now, to help the family in their time of loss. No one considers that you might have lost something too, even if it was just a known quantity of misery. Eventually, the new master settles in. The rules are re-established. The punishment resumes. You find yourself falling into a new rhythm, slightly different, but familiar enough. You learn where to stand, how to serve, when to speak. You forget the old master's voice. You adapt, because you must. Because when your master dies, the world does not open. It rearranges, and you remain exactly where you were, at the bottom, still breathing, still working, still owned. You don't get a say in where you go. You never have. Being sold, inherited, or given away is just another reminder that you are not a person in the eyes of this world. You are an asset, like a cow, a shovel, or a sack of barley that talks too much. When your owner decides to trade you, it's not framed as a decision about you. It's framed as convenience, debt repayment, or a gesture of goodwill to someone more important. You're moved the same way furniture is moved, without warning, without ceremony, and without anyone asking how it feels. Sometimes the sale is quiet, a hushed negotiation in the back room of a longhouse, sealed with a nod or a handshake. One day you're in the fields, minding your own business, and the next you're handed to a stranger like borrowed tools. Other times it's public, part of a larger trade or settlement. Maybe it's a feast day, and someone is showing off their wealth by acquiring new thralls. You get inspected like meat at a market. Teeth checked, arms flexed, scars noted. No one speaks to you directly. They speak about you, over you, around you, never to you. You learn quickly that being sold isn't necessarily better or worse than staying put. It's just different. A gamble you never asked to make. Some new masters are indifferent, some are worse, and a rare few are slightly less cruel. You don't get to choose, of course. You just hope that the new household doesn't include a drunk uncle, a sadistic overseer, or too many bored adolescent sons. You pray that the food is tolerable, the roof doesn't leak too much, and the rules are consistent enough that you won't get punished for breaking ones you didn't know existed. The journey to your new home isn't comfortable. If you're lucky, they put you on a cart. If you're not, you walk through forest paths, across frozen streams, over jagged hills. You carry your own belongings, which is to say, nothing. Maybe a ragged cloak or a wooden bowl, if someone didn't think to reclaim it. You eat what you're given, when it's given. You sleep on the ground, if it gets dark, and you arrive sore, hungry, and already behind on expectations you haven't yet learned. If you're inherited rather than sold, the process is more insulting, but less painful. You're passed on like an old tool, part of someone's estate, shuffled along with their sheep, bowls and debts. Maybe you go to a son, maybe a cousin, maybe a new wife inherits you from her late husband and decides you don't match the decor. It all depends on which name appears beside yours on the ledger. Not that you ever see it. Inheritance brings its own problems. New masters often feel the need to assert control early, remind you that even if you belonged to their father or uncle before, now you belong to them. Some will try to break you all over again, even if you weren't resisting. They want obedience with their stamp on it. They don't want a slave. They want their slave. And if that means beating you on the first day, or renaming you to something more convenient, so be it. Sometimes you're split from people you've lived with for years. Fellow thralls, people who shared your fire at night. The girl you once helped during childbirth. The boy who limped after frostbite took part of his toe. You've survived together, laughed a little in stolen moments, shared what little food or comfort you had. Now you watch them disappear over the horizon, sold to someone else, or staying behind while you're hauled away. You don't get to say goodbye. The people in charge don't understand why you'd want to. There's a myth that being sold means you're strong, capable, valuable, that you're worth something. That's a lie told by people who aren't the ones being sold. You're moved because it suits someone else, because a deal was struck or a favour was owed. You could be the best worker in the household or the most forgettable. It doesn't matter. What matters is that someone wanted something, and you were the easiest piece to move. The worst part isn't the move itself. It's the reset, the starting over, learning the new master's temper, the new rules, the new names for the same old chores, gauging how quickly they punish, how far they can be pushed, whether they prefer silence or smiles. You begin the slow process of becoming invisible again, trying not to stand out until the danger passes, if it ever does. And if you're bought by someone who's heard good things, someone who expects obedience, discipline, usefulness, then you'd better live up to that reputation. Because failing to meet expectations you didn't set is a fast track to suffering. There's no grace period, no orientation, just a shove through a doorway and an unspoken demand. Prove you were worth the price. So you do what you always do. You lower your eyes, you nod, you listen, you start over. Because being sold or inherited doesn't free you. It doesn't change your status. It just shifts the weight. A new hand gripping the leash. A new voice calling your name. Or more likely, calling you boy, girl, thing, or nothing at all. You keep moving, because that's all you've ever done. Not forward, not upward, just elsewhere. And wherever you go, the work waits. The rules wait, the silence waits. The only thing that doesn't wait is you. Because no one ever asks if you are ready. You don't grow old gracefully as a Viking slave. You don't retire, reminisce, or sit by the fire with a warm drink and a wool blanket. You just wear out, slowly, quietly, like a tool that's been overused and never sharpened. Aging isn't a phase here. It's a problem, one your owners notice long before you do. The moment your steps slow or your grip weakens, you've crossed an invisible line, from useful to maybe not worth keeping. It starts small, a knee that doesn't quite bend all the way, a shoulder that locks up in the cold, You grunt when you rise, wince when you lift, and find yourself taking longer to finish tasks that used to be automatic. You try to hide it. You move a little faster when someone's watching. You shift weight to the other leg. You lie about pain, or just pretend not to hear the question. Thralls don't get sympathy. They get replaced. There's no medical care for you. Not really. If you're lucky, another slave might know some herbs or how to wrap a wound without making it worse. But there's no doctor, no rest days, no easing back into work. You get hurt, you're expected to heal on your own time. And if you don't, well, that's not anyone else's concern. You'll still be sent to the field, still be told to haul water, still be shouted at when you fall behind. Injury is a constant risk. One bad step, one kick from a horse, one slip with a blade, and you're out of commission. But out of commission doesn't mean off the hook. It just means the work gets harder. You might be limping, bleeding, half-conscious, but the chores keep coming. You'll drag yourself through them, because not doing so means punishment. They won't stop beating you just because your ribs are cracked. If anything, they'll do it harder for being inconvenient. Some injuries never heal. You learn to live with them. The twisted ankle that never quite untwists, the deep cut that reopens every winter, the crooked fingers from that time you dropped a pot and were taught a lesson. These aren't things that earn you pity. They're reminders, evidence that you've survived this long, or, from the master's point of view, signs that you're nearing the end of your usefulness. As you age, everything becomes heavier, not just the buckets and the firewood, but the days themselves. The mornings take longer to warm your joints. The nights are colder, longer, and harder on your bones. You sleep worse, you wake sorer. Your dreams, once filled with vague hope or escape, become more practical. A softer bed, a quieter day, fewer stairs. You stop thinking about freedom and start thinking about knees. Your appearance changes too. Your hair thins, your teeth loosen, your skin cracks and scars over. You look in reflective water and barely recognise the face staring back. Not because you've changed so much, but because no one has called you by name in years. You've become the background, part of the furniture, an old tool in a box no one opens unless absolutely necessary. If you were born into slavery, aging is all you've known. If you were taken into it, you remember a time when your body worked better, when you could run, lift, laugh without wincing. That memory fades though, not all at once. It wears down like the rest of you. Every season smooths out the edges of who you were, until you forget too. Eventually, the younger slaves pass you. They're faster, stronger, less broken. They carry what you can't, reach what you won't, and understand that age is not a shield. If anything, it makes you more vulnerable. You might resent them or envy them or pity them for what's coming, but mostly you keep your head down and pray they don't get you reassigned for being too slow. You're not old enough to be spared, just old enough to be ignored. No one announces your decline. There's no meeting, no warning, just a gradual shift. Fewer tasks given to you, less eye contact, less expectation. Until one day, someone asks why you're still here at all. And that's the real danger. Not aging, but being noticed as someone who's aging. That's when talk of selling you, trading you, or simply casting you out begins. They might not say it to your face, but they don't have to. You hear it in the way they stop correcting you, in the way your name, if you still have one, vanishes from their mouths. The very thing you've spent your life trying to achieve, invisibility, predictability, quiet survival, turns on you when your body can't keep up. You've made yourself easy to ignore, and now they do, until you're too broken to be worth keeping. What happens next depends on the master. Some will let you linger, working small tasks, quietly fading. Others will find a reason to get rid of you. Maybe you'll be sent to a poorer household, one that'll accept your cracked hands in exchange for a lower price. Maybe you'll be left behind in the cold one morning, while everyone else walks on. Or maybe, if you're really lucky, they'll stop giving you orders, not out of mercy, but because they've already decided you're done. And when that day comes, you won't be angry. You'll be tired. Tired in your bones, in your chest, in whatever part of you still dares to feel. Because aging doesn't kill you. It just takes away your usefulness, one piece at a time, until the only thing left is silence, and still the chores go on, even if you don't. You don't die dramatically. There's no battle cry, no last words whispered into the wind, no soft bed, no priest, no family holding your hand. You die the way you lived, quietly, in the margins, without ceremony or notice. One day your body just gives out. Maybe it's the cold, maybe it's an untreated infection, or a fall, or your heart deciding it's finally had enough. Whatever it is, it doesn't feel important. Not to them. When it happens, you're still working, still trying. You're hauling water or shoveling snow, or struggling to lift something that was always just a bit too heavy. Maybe you slip. Maybe you cough, and then you don't stop coughing. Maybe you just sit down for a moment and never get back up. You tell yourself it's fine. You just need a minute. But minutes pass and so does everything else. No one notices right away. People pass you by, assuming you're resting, or lazy, or sulking. Eventually, someone kicks your boot, or shouts your name, or whatever name they used for you. You don't respond. They frown. They kick harder. When you still don't move, they curse and call for someone to drag you out of the way. That's the moment your death becomes real to them. Not when your soul left your body, but when your body became an inconvenience. There is no mourning, no ritual, no grave marker with dates etched in stone. If someone digs a hole, it's out of necessity, not respect. If they don't have time, you might be wrapped in old cloth and dropped into a pit at the edge of the forest, or into a shallow ditch behind the stable. Maybe the dogs sniff around first. Maybe they don't bother. The land reclaims you quickly. It always does. Your fellow thralls don't say much. They can't. They're still working. They noticed you were slowing down. They heard your cough, saw the way your hands trembled when you lifted the bucket. They knew it was coming. They just hoped it wouldn't be so soon, or so close. One of them might mutter a quiet word under their breath that night. Not a prayer, not a tribute, just a name, or the memory of one. And then they go to sleep, because they have to rise before dawn, the same as always. The household doesn't pause. No one mentions you at breakfast. The master might complain about the smell. If your body was found indoors, the lady of the house might make a remark about needing someone else to sweep the hearth. That's the extent of your eulogy. Your death isn't a loss. It's a vacancy. Your possessions, such as they were, are taken without ceremony. A cracked bowl, a patch of cloth, maybe a ragged blanket that barely kept the wind out. Someone else gets them now, or they're thrown into the fire if they're deemed too filthy to reuse. You are erased in minutes, faster even than it took to forget your real name. You won't be remembered. There are no songs for you, no lineage to record your deeds. The children you might have had, if they weren't sold or starved or beaten into silence, will grow up knowing only what the collar taught them, that silence is safer and hope is expensive. Maybe they'll live long enough to die the same way. Maybe not. Either way, no one's keeping records. Your story ends the same way most of them do, with a whimper, not a cry, a sigh that no one heard, a task unfinished, a body unclaimed. You were born somewhere else. You were someone else. You had a voice once, dreams maybe, but the years ground those down to routine and obedience. And eventually, even death feels like just another chore you didn't get to finish. If anyone remembers you in the weeks that follow, it's as a cautionary tale. Don't get sick like the old one. Work faster than she did. You become an example, a lesson, a void that others are expected to fill. Your body might be gone, but your absence still gets measured. In chores undone, in roles reassigned, in silence filled by the next person in line. Time moves on, the seasons change, the snow melts, A new thrall is bought or taken. They sleep in your old place, wear your hand-me-downs, take on your chores. They don't ask about you. Why would they? They're too busy trying not to meet the same end. They'll learn the same lessons you did. Maybe faster, maybe slower, but they'll get there. And that's the final truth of your life. You are not the main character, not in anyone's story. You are a line in someone else's ledger, a shadow in someone else's home. You lived, you suffered, you died. And then the world kept turning, utterly unimpressed by your endurance. But still for a while, you were here. You did the work, you felt the cold, you remembered your name, even when no one else did. You mattered, if only to yourself. And that, in this world, was the closest thing you ever got to freedom.